Why are there so many podcasts about Tottenham? Do I want to know why? They might contain insight, but mostly delusions. If I hear one more, I might die. They don't like Levy and they don't like Iain.
Welcome back to Poddenham Podspur, the Spurs podcast about Spurs podcasts. Today I'm joined by Gareth Dace, author, historian, podcaster, and I think last time I said all-round good guy, so I'll say that again, Gareth, so that you don't get a complex.
How little you know about me, Iain.
Well, I'm all about promoting positive vibes. Gareth is, I'm just going to spin off some of your projects because there's some really cool ones in there. I was describing some of them yesterday to a friend and they were very, very impressed. So Gareth is the author of Hot Shot Tottenham, all about Spurs in the 80s. Is Gascoigne Going To Have a Crack? All about Spurs in the 90s. And he is also the host of Is Gascoigne Going To Have a Crack? The Spurs Nostalgia Podcast, which he started in the last 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, last summer.
Yeah. Perhaps I've got a loose grip on time at the moment. And Gareth is also a frequent contributor on the Game Is About Glory podcast with Milo and Steph. So, Gareth, thanks for coming back. You're on your second time on the pod. So, if you get one more, you get a hat-trick ball.
Thank you. Last time we were on, there was probably only 112 Spurs Weekly podcasts that were out there, and now I've contributed and added to that, and there's 100 and... in fact, that's for you to reveal the number, but I know it's a very dynamic situation.
It is, because you get those that go away and those that pop up. If I add to the list, I think it's over 120, because we've had at least 5 since the turn of the year.
Wow.
I've been wondering if when things get good, and they will, things will get good. You know, like you're a studier of history. Like there's ebbs and flows. I'm curious to know if fallow periods are more conducive to making starting Spurs podcasts than when it's good. You know, it's like that need to vent is stronger than that need to celebrate.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer to that will be. I don't know where the appetite is. Perversely, I'm someone, because you've had this conversation or you've discussed it about why people listen to podcasts, or in particular Spurs podcasts. I've got to say, the only time when I wouldn't go through my usual list of weekly podcasts would be if we had a very routine 2-0 victory. Now, it's a long time since we've had any routine 2-0 victories, but that would be the sort of thing where I think, what the extra inch, or what's the fighting cock, or what's the view from the lane going to tell me that I didn't already know, when it's one of those run-of-the-mill comfortable 2-0 victories. Maybe we'll get back to a point where those happen more frequently, but at the moment it's living in the constant soap opera where you just want to know. You want to know what do people speculate, what do they think is going to happen next, and that's obviously where we've been, particularly in the last 2 to 3 weeks, where you've been waiting for that cliched announcement on the club website with a corner flag, and the speculation about when or if that's coming has been what's been keeping the podcast in full drive, really.
Yeah, it has. It's been a bit repetitive. I feel like I think I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, wanting to come in and comment on it. And you must feel this on the Game Is About Glory, which is just, what is there new to say about the situation? We expected it weeks ago. It hasn't happened. What more is there to say? Nothing's really changed. Yes, we've qualified out of the Champions League, like to the round of 16 or whatever. Cool, we still want him gone. For the most part, there's a lot of people who still want change. There'll still be no new signings.
Yeah, Milo thinks very hard, between him and Steph when they're creating each weekly podcast. How can we make sure that we are creating a slightly different message, so that, as you said, it's not just a rinse and repeat of last week? And so the other difficulty, it might be a difficulty, it might actually make things easier, is when you go from Wednesday to Saturday or Tuesday, Sunday, or whatever the configuration of games are, we are largely seeing the midweeks have been better than the weekends at the moment. So if you're recording on the Friday, the vibe suddenly feels very different to if you then wait until the Sunday evening after the subsequent Premier League game.
This is very true. And of course, Spurs have such a good history in the 80s. So it must be nice to revisit that. There's such a strong association with Spurs in Europe. We change our kits for it. There is a different vibe for Spurs. Watching Spurs under the lights. We have a bunch of little, not memes because that sounds too millennial, but we have a little series of little touch points and in jokes and in references to the importance of Spurs in Europe. So it's been a great respite. I think Jack on Raw the Roosters called it a sanctuary from everything else happening, and that does feel pretty true. You can turn up and see at least a performance.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I suppose you've probably got to ask yourself: is that about relative strength of opposition? Is it something that's fairly unique about playing in Europe? Like you say, obviously the 80s were, the 60s, 70s and 80s all produced glorious nights in Europe. Even if I think back to that first season we had back under Martin Jol in 2006-07, there's a real excitement about playing in Europe that year. And our record, particularly at home in Europe, is so incongruous with obviously what's happening in the league. What will be 24 games unbeaten at home now in European games? It's it's really mad. And I remember there was a point when, or in fact, Martin Jol's last game, the game when he was infamously sacked at half time, which didn't happen, but it's a good story. It's a good narrative. I think when Getafe, who beat us that night, that was only the second time in our history we'd lost a home game in Europe, the first time being against Real Madrid in the 84-85 season. So it was something that happened very, very rarely. And we're obviously now building up a bit of momentum where it just seems to be, as Jack said, it's that sanctuary. It's to switch out of league and domestic mindset, turn up for European game, and it feels very, very different.
I was going to ask you about the record in the 80s, but you've answered it with that Real Madrid point. No shame in losing the Real Madrid, I think, even at home. That's a tough team to expect to win against ever. So even back, I can't speak to their 1980s form, but I'm assuming it was pretty strong.
They always are, yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking, about things that are happening now, but we're here to talk about your new podcast. It's been a real treat to see it come out and see the reaction to it. And it's been such a breath of fresh air. We were talking just now about contemporary podcasts and things changing. And you got to work hard to keep your content fresh, but not everybody does that. So I think adding in a new podcast with a very different angle, being focused on nostalgia in the 90s has been very refreshing, even if that period of time isn't associated with all good memories. Obviously there's nostalgia which kind of tints everything towards being a little bit more positive because maybe you were younger, maybe you were a kid. Obviously you had the 91 Cup final. Do you want to talk to spinning off a podcast, from your experiences being a guest, talking about your books on various pods, being a regular contributor and, talking head on The Game Is About Glory? Like, how did you find the transition from being more of a guest to being in the driving seat?
It's probably something that comes quite naturally to me through my real life, I guess, or through my work. I've presented various webinars where I've had guests on, and actually, I really enjoyed just getting into that flow of booking a guest, writing a script up, trying to find some form of narrative or thread that takes you through that. Not so much on the production. That's very much credit to Milo, who was very, very patient with me. This was literally him teaching me how to use Audacity was much like teaching your granddad how to send an email. He was very, very good in showing me how to do that. So that was something that this time 9 months ago, whenever it was, I couldn't have imagined. That would have been the thing. I was always pretty confident I could back myself to write a good script or to put a good show together. But the actual post-production of it and how you actually get it out there so that people hear it was something I always assumed would be slightly beyond me. But yeah, due to Milo's help, it wasn't. It's obviously my. Or anyone who listens to Games Out Glory will know that I'm always looking to try and shoehorn in 90s references all the time. So this just felt like a really good opportunity to have a bit of fun with a topic and with an era that I'm very affectionate about. It's also a good way of just trying to keep the books relevant and live, and so that people are aware of them, which was very much probably a tertiary motivation really in setting up the podcast. But it's been a really, really good experience. I've really enjoyed doing it, and I hope I will continue to enjoy doing it for as long as it feels like there's a need for a Spurs Nostalgia podcast.
When did you have the idea to start it? Did it just kind of slowly bubble up over time, or did you just wake up one night and say, I should start a pod?
It probably did bubble up a little bit, really. It probably was giving all those references to the 90s in Gareth's 90s Corner on Game Is About Glory. We did do those episodes where we spoke specifically about Spurs in the 90s. We did one in the 80s, which Steph did a lot of heavy lifting on, and Spurs in the 2000s. So those were podcasts that I really enjoyed being part of. So the idea was probably there. My weakness was always, how on earth am I going to actually learn to produce these things? And so that's where Milo came in and provided a great assist in getting this Gascoigne Going To Have a crack out there.
It takes some time. I mean, I know from my own experience of it. I had to learn Audacity a few years ago for like a work project, so I had a bit of a leg up. But the amount of production that you put in with clips of audio commentary from games, which I love, and I guess this is a good time to ask you now, but that's an added level of production that you do add. It's a nice like extra level of sheen that adds to an already great podcast. It's really fun to hear these kind of old, oh God, I'm going to sound like such a young person, even though I'm 40. But like the audio quality is slightly worse on 1990s sports commentary. The crowd noise of the old White Hart Lane and stuff like that. It's a real. I don't know. It's almost like ASMR, But there's so much extra work I imagine you put into finding those clips and choosing the right ones and processing them to get them into the podcast and where to place them. So there must be a lot of time spent on production for you.
There is, yeah. Probably actually recording the interview itself is the quick bit, but I would say for every hour of podcast content that actually goes out there, there's probably at least an hour in prep probably no more than that. For some of the ones I'm doing, it's an hour and a half, 2 hours in writing that script and putting that together. And then, as you said, the post-production is probably best part of an hour as well, depending on how much audio clips I need to find. I could get stuck for hours on YouTube just going down rabbit holes of 90s football clips and commentary. So much of that audio and clips are in my head anywhere from all the end of season VHSs I used to get as a kid. So,
I miss those. They were so good.
They were. I mean, particularly, I think I like the ones from the very, very early 90s. So the pre-Premier League ones when ITV used to and the Football League used to commission these videos. So it would be sort of Martin Tyler's commentary, and I can hear kind of word for word some of the phrases or that he said that I would have then repeated in the playground as a kid, and they've just perpetuated. But somewhere they've been locked away in a cabinet in the back of my mind. But I can spend far too long on, particularly on the bonus episodes that I send out before each game, which is really, they're only 10, 15-minute monologues of me going back and talking about games from the 90s. And I tell myself, look, it's only intended as a 10-minute podcast bonus episode. And then I find that I've spent an hour going to find a clip where I can find a commentator referencing the name of the opponent that we're playing in, a particular player, and you go through them and you think, do I like that one? And you press record and you get it, and then you stop recording. You think, oh, if only I'd let that run for another 5 seconds, it would have given me something better. So there's probably a better discipline and a better process to get through in searching these to do it more efficiently. But yeah, it's part of that labour of love, and you get into flow state, or I certainly get into flow state trying to put it all together.
I mean, it's certainly reminiscent of the what's it called, Top 10 Tottenham, the Spurs show interviews that they do.
Mike Lee's one.
Yeah, but it works really well there, and I think it works perfectly for your podcast too in terms of tone and vibe. And the music as well adds to that too. Your intro music is phenomenal. Is it a song, or did you find it from a catalog?
I found it from YouTube Media or something. It was a free one anyway.
Yeah.
The one I really wanted to go with, that I maybe overthought and thought, am I going to be subject to any copyright, was the old ITV The Big Matches theme tune.
Oh, yeah.
Which would have been obviously pre-Premier League, which is very, very evocative. Or the Saint and Greavesy theme tune.
I was going to mention Saint and Greavesy because I remember having a Jimmy Greaves VHS of it was like top 5 or 5 important games from the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
I have that like seared into my brain, that box.
Okay.
That's just like lost media now, that type of stuff. I mean, I'm sure it's uploaded to YouTube, but that type of thing where you'd have an ex-pro or somebody just it's like the Jeremy Clarkson, car videos you'd be able to buy as well, where it wouldn't be quite Top Gear. It'd be like something made just for the VHS. I don't think you see that anymore, that genre of content.
I don't think so. No, well, I mean, just to go off on a bit of a tangent there, but so I can tell you the origin of that video, or the concept behind it. You said, how would we weave the Spurs in the 80s into this conversation? So I may have just found a way, but this was one of the many innovations that Irving Scholar came up with. That he was a pioneer, and he recognised there was this gap in the market for videos, books, nostalgia merchandise, effectively. So he commissioned this video of, I think it was like Spurs 5 best games ever, or something he could find footage of. I can't remember if it was, I don't think it was specific to Europe, but so they created this video, and Jimmy Greaves by the mid 80s probably was the most high profile ex-footballer doing media, but not just football media, because he had I'm not sure he was presenting Saint and Greavesy by that point, but he was also a regular on whatever TVAM. He was a very, very well-known figure. So they got Greavesy to do that. But Scholar's innovation didn't end there. That he also put a deal together with the other members of the Big Five, Arsenal, Liverpool, Everton and Manchester United. And they produced the same video for each of those 5 clubs, sold them, and then Spurs got a bit of the royalties from it. But Greaves, I think, did the voiceover for all of them.
Oh, that's cool. This came up in your interview with Mihir Bose, right?
Yes. Yeah. We spoke about some of Irving Scholar's innovations. Yeah.
I mean, we can talk about him in a minute, but it's crazy how Spurs weren't able to capitalize on some of these innovations. It's such a missed opportunity there for us. But just coming back to spinning out and building up the pod. Like, how much did you put into, or how did you approach brainstorming and structuring what you wanted to go into that first season, which covers, like, I guess the 89-90 season and a little bit of the 80s because of the Irving Scholar stuff. It sort of spreads back a little bit further, and goes up to what, the 94-95 season, or 95?
We've gone up to, so season 1 concludes with Terry Venables' very controversial sacking at the end of the 93 season. 93,
there we go. Okay. So, how did you go about structuring that, deciding an end point, and finding guests too to fit with what you wanted to cover and what you wanted to say?
Yeah, so I think I loosely wanted it to run chronologically, so it made sense to follow the same timelines as is covered within the book. I'd always wanted to. I think one of the first aspects of the podcast I wanted to do was season reviews, and that's always something that I wanted or expected someone else was going to produce probably years ago and do some historical season reviews. So that sort of naturally take you through a chronological journey through the 90s. I don't think when I first started it, I'd naturally considered doing it in 3 parts. So the early 90s, the mid 90s and the late 90s. That's kind of just happened as I got through season 1. But I'm someone who likes structure, so it would have felt to me anyway, if I'd gone from talking about the 89-90 season with Theo Delaney and then the next episode being about Christian Gross's appointment in 97 and then starting back and doing the FA Cup final in 91, just for me that would have just felt a bit cluttered. to my brain. So yeah, running it chronologically, I thought makes sense, so that there is a bit of a storyline running through it, and you can track progress as we went through. I think the only episode that I've recorded that didn't follow that sort of tight chronological structure was the first one I did, which was the interview with Darren Anderton, where I was quite helpfully actually talked out of trying to run it totally chronologically. So I picked it up through the themes of the book, which was magic, mayhem and mediocrity, which naturally darted us around and took us back and forth across the 90s, in fact just into the 2000s when he was still a Spurs player.
Yeah, it must be tough to cover the mediocrity part when talking to a player who was active and so important during that period of time. And what a great start! I mean, to get Darren Anderson on. I mean, had you spoken to him for the books? I'm trying to recall.
No, I hadn't. Yeah. No. Yeah. No, I mean, I've mentioned Milo several times as being really, really integral to getting this off the ground. But amongst the other people who I really need to thank are Mike Lee, just for his extensive contacts book, really. And it was Mike who had spoken to Darren Anderson before, and he passed me his number and said, give him a try, and I did, and it took me back to in my single days of texting a girl and then waiting for a response. And I'm someone who would have spent every minute of every day waiting for that text message to come back. So that's a little bit older and wiser now, but it was like I sent that message to Darren Anderson. I think it was sort of quite early or mid-morning. I thought, you know what I need to do, just for my own sanity and for my work productivity here, I need to put my phone away and agree not to look at it until like 5 o'clock. And then I came back to my phone at 5 o'clock, and I'd had a response from him. But
lovely guy, and anybody who was a Spurs fan, especially a young Spurs fan in the 90s, just idolize Darren Anderson. And it's such a great interview. He's got so much to say, and it's please go back and listen if you haven't already, people. Like it's really good. Mike Lee's tremendous. I remember interviewing him for Poddenham, and he got this imposter syndrome off my back because he texted, I think, Salman Rushdie's son or somebody to try to get him onto the Spurs show, and you think, wow, I'm nervous about asking Gareth to come onto my pod. and there's people out there texting Salman Rushdie, just get over it and just do it. So the guests have been great, and I've got some season 1 themes that I've picked out just to kind of give people and some insight into what you've put into the season. So we've got player interviews with Darren Anderton, Eric Tortsvet, Guy Butters, Anthony Potts. I don't think I've missed anybody there, right?
And Naeem.
Although
that wasn't. Naeem appeared on an episode. It wasn't exclusively to talk about his Spurs career, though.
There we go. Season reviews with Theo Delaney, Jason McGovern, Ewan Flynn, Johnny Blaine. So a couple of podcasters, a couple of authors in there. You had 2 episodes on the FA Cup semi and final. It ended up being, I think one of them was a bonus episode. Some stuff on the club hierarchy. So you had the Irving Scholar coverage with Mihir Bose, who wrote a book on the ex-chairman, ex-owner.
Wrote with him.
Yeah, there we go. I was trying to look it up to buy it, but it's like $200 at the moment.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, he spoke
so
well on it.
There are a few still out there, but
he spoke so well on it. I wanted to go and dig into it because Irving Scholar's always been this thing for me that no one ever talks about anymore. Like I think he said he's still alive, and I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Because he just never is in the discussion anymore. It's Alan Sugar, and then it stops.
That's it.
So I found that fascinating. It's always been a name that I've heard, but I haven't heard too many people discuss other than actually I would say negatively for the most part, like from what I remember as a kid. Sugar and Venables, as you said, you capped that off with Julie Welch and Milo from The Game Is About Glory, and I think you've a few other things thrown in there too, but those are kind of the main themes. And what I like about that is if you wanted to go back and revisit it as a listener, you can just pick out these threads and go, okay, I'm going to just focus on player interviews. I'm just going to focus on the club hierarchy stuff, like the behind the scenes things. I think I missed your interview with John Sheridan too, the physio, with the best one. I love that. That was so good. And not a person I would thought I would want to hear an interview from.
I mean, John's such a lovely man. I hadn't spoken to him before approaching him for that. His book that came out is the same publishing company pitch that my books have gone through. And in fact, they've helped me. They've made a couple of other introductions, so that's been really helpful. And yeah, John was such a lovely man. But physios have got such an incredible insight into what's going on that they're often, I mean, as in John's case, he was brought in by David Pleat. David Pleat left in acrimonious circumstances, and then Terry Venables takes over, and then John Sheridan's there right through that transition. It's also the transition of the club ownership. He was there through, and then he's perhaps most famous for his role in helping Gaz's rehabilitation after the 91 Cup final. But John's own story, and we didn't really touch on it in the podcast just for the time. He mentions it, the fact that he was the limping physio for a reason. He had a very serious accident as a kid that stopped him being able to do a lot of things that most 15-year-old boys would want to be able to do. He couldn't play football as a result. It was a real sort of life-changing moment for him, and he was obviously able to channel that, I think, later on in life into becoming a physio and having that empathy for players. So from a human perspective, a bit like Anthony Potts, really, I just thought it was a really good human story that comes out in that.
And you can see with the video logs put out by James Madison, the relationship between player and physio during this recovery time. And when you think back when John was working, I think he said it was like him and one other person, maybe. It was him and Dave Butler. Yeah. So they would have that type of relationship with pretty much every player recovering at that point. And you can just see what the role is that they play in motivating these guys and contributing to the culture of the club. So that was a great interview. Moving on, like, listener responses have been amazing. I think, 5 stars on Spotify. You've got some good reviews on there, getting comments. I was just looking through your book reviews too. I don't know if this is something you look at, but I think I got one here for the first book about the 90s. Brilliant read for Spurs fans that were old enough but may not have understood all the dramas the club went through in the 90s. Highly recommend. People saying that they bought it for their dads and it took them back. And it's just, I think that must be, I hope that's a nice shot in the arm and a real point of pride for you that it's resonated well, both the podcast and the books. I think you've tapped into a part of Spurs psyche. Do you pay attention to feedback at all?
I'd be lying to you if I said I didn't go and check fairly regularly whether I'd had reviews on there. But you said they've all come across. They've all been really, really positive. They're fairly small in numbers, which is reflected with the number of listeners that I get. But I always knew, and we had that conversation when I sort of sought your advice really on whether this was a good idea. It is going to be fairly niche, but probably the audience that listens to it, it's filling a gap that otherwise isn't through the other 122 podcasts that are out every week.
There's a real chill that I get. I feel so embarrassed to say I see a comment comes in on Spotify and I get an email. I'm like, oh, what's this? And it's somebody saying something very nice. I need more of that in my life. Any favorite episodes or guests talking about enjoyment that other people have had? What about you? What have you enjoyed the most?
Yeah, I know, this is like asking to pick your favorite child.
Yeah, and I understand that it's tough because like the guests are, they've all given their time to you. Maybe a better way to phrase it would be like something you didn't expect to be as to be as enjoyable as it was, right? Because they're all great. Let's not downplay anything.
Yeah. I mean, they're all great. This is me saying it as a person who's great, and they're all great for me, for different reasons. You did prepare me. You were going to ask me this question. I'm still stumbling over an answer for it.
I can share mine if that would help you.
Go on, you share yours there.
We talked about John Sheridan. That one, I think that one you shared with me as like a preview, and that I loved it. I think as soon as I heard that, Gareth's gonna nail it. So many good stories, and he's so personable. But I was listening back yesterday to the Mihir Bose episode, and that was my favorite. That was because I almost wish I listened to it first because it covers the 80s as well. So you get this period of time of like what Spurs were leading into the 90s. And I love that, and he speaks so well I was aware of his Spurs fandom. I was aware of him as a writer, but I wasn't aware of the book. I wasn't aware of his relationship with our former owner, and I thought it was fascinating. There's all these minutiae that I was aware of through your books, but were able to be fleshed out, and I feel like that's what the podcast really does. It's such an added layer on top of the book of the same name, because you don't have the page space to get into like not embellishing, but like fleshing out concepts and topics, and hearing somebody's excitement or confusion or sadness about a topic. So I think that was probably my favorite, and obviously the Sugar and Venables stuff. Like that one went long, right? An hour, was it an hour and a half? It was
we went on quite a bit. Yeah, poor old Julie nearly burnt her house down because she had dinner in the oven at the time, which is why it was very. I've managed to cleverly edit it at the end, but it was probably me and Milo for about the last 20 minutes of that episode.
I didn't. That was seamless. I didn't realize.
So yeah, I mean, it's really nice of you to say all those things. Definitely that was what I wanted. I wanted the podcast not just to be an audio version of the book. I wanted them to be able to go into slightly more detail or to discuss some of the nuance behind certain things. The two episodes you name, I think, are really integral, not necessarily to the podcast, but just to that whole Spurs story, that trying to understand Irving Scholar's motivations and what he was trying to do. Now, clearly he didn't execute, or between him and the people running the club and the PLC with him, they didn't quite manage to execute that plan. But but between Mihir, Bose and Julie, they are totemic figures in sports journalism, really throughout that period, and as doyens of Spurs history as well. Being able to talk to both of them and get them both on the on the pod to do those respective episodes was incredible. It feels as much of a coup as getting Darren Anderson on there and Eric Tortsvet and the other players that you name. I think maybe on reflection, and I've already referenced it, but the conversations I had certainly with John Sheridan and with Anthony Potts as well, felt like they were really human stories. That whilst at surface level it's a podcast about football. My in-laws, who have got absolutely no interest in football whatsoever, kind of actively dislike football. I don't know that they've listened to any of the podcast episodes yet, and I'm not sure that they would. But I think for them, one of those two episodes might just land because it is that human story.
Yeah. For the same reason, I really liked your season reviews with people like Theo Delaney and also Tim Vickery. Like, he wasn't a season review, but he was reflecting on.
Yeah, he was very good, Tim. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just nice to hear the boots on the ground, people in the stands aspect, because obviously you bring that, but from somebody else who was living a life at the same time and wasn't involved in the club. I enjoyed those too, because especially being a child during these things, and I just didn't have that experience, so I like that. I like hearing fan experiences.
Yeah, and I think Tim probably is at risk of being typecast as being the South American football journalist. So I'd heard him do a podcast about the '84 UEFA Cup final a couple of years ago, and it just felt real. I knew he was a Spurs fan, but hearing him not talk exclusively about South American players, it just felt really odd. But he was clearly very, very articulate, and he as you said, what he did so well. We were talking to him about Gascoigne and Lineker and watching them as players, but he was so good at being able to articulate the wider context in a way that I hadn't thought of beforehand. So I think he really, really helped to add several layers to that episode, which again could have been, and I'd like to think it still would have been good if we'd just spoken about Gascoigne and Lineker as players and individuals. But yeah, the layers that he brought to that conversation, I think, really added to it.
It was an interesting combination to have those two together on that show as well. Like, how did that come about that you put the guy and Tim together? Yeah,
again, they didn't know each other. I knew both of them through writing Hotshot Tottenham. Guy I've had a few conversations with on the phone, and he's a really good speaker and had a really good memory and was able to tell some really good stories about both of them even before we'd done the podcast. So yeah, it's always a bit of a gamble. It's a bit like when you go out as a kid, well, probably the same as being an adult as well, and you've got two friends with you from different from different groups,
Yeah.
and you can be a little bit anxious about, well, how are they going to get on, or what can I do just to try and build a bit of rapport. And totally by um, totally by accident, Guy and Tim worked out quite well, because I joined the call 2 minutes after I'd scheduled it. So I came on and both of them were already on there and chatting anyway, which was which was helpful. They said they didn't know each other, but it worked quite well. I think I'd managed to work out, these are the questions I need to ask Guy, and these are the questions that I need to ask Tim.
You talked a little bit then about interviewing some of these wonderful people for the books. How did you find the interview experience for a podcast, and also the researching and framing questions? Can you speak to how you approached it differently, or lessons you learned as a writer versus a podcaster?
Yeah, so Darren Anderson I was quite nervous about talking to, because I'd never physically spoken to him until we recorded the podcast. It had just been conversation over WhatsApp until then, and I was really basing a lot of things I was going to ask him on his book Take Note, which was written probably, I don't know, maybe not 10 years ago, but you could really, through reading his book, you could really detect that there was this like resentment or frustration about the way that people respond to him. Because the first thing people say, which is the same thing people say to me when I talk about Darren Anderson, they go, "Oh, well, sick note."
It's really unfair. And you hear his story.
Yeah.
I haven't read his book, but in your podcast, and when you realize what he was being put through, being asked to be on the subs bench, and when he was clearly injured, because it would be a good positive sign to the fans, and playing through injury, you realize it wasn't his fault.
No, absolutely no. Unfortunately, I think he's very chilled out about it now. I would suggest more chilled out than he was when he was even writing the book, and that might be the fact that he lives in California now, most of the year. Just maybe he's that much further away, and he's less likely to sit down near someone in a restaurant who's going to come over, and whether maliciously or thinking or not, saying, "Oh, sick note, hope you don't get injured eating your dinner," which is the sort of anecdote that he was sharing in the book. Maybe he's just that much older, it's that much further away, that he's a bit more chilled out about it. But no, I think on the WhatsApp conversation I'd had with him the day before, and I put in the script, I'd put in questions. I thought I need to ask him about the injuries. I can't not talk to him about the injuries. And I sent him like a message saying, "Look, I just want to check, are you happy with it?" And he said, "Oh, yeah." He said, "I'm sort of quite chilled out about it." It was only really once we recorded, I just said, "Just want to check again. Is there anything around the injuries you don't talk about?" He goes, "No, it's absolutely fine." And and he was.
And this is the key as an interviewer, is knowing your subject, like the person you're interviewing, and just clarifying consent for stuff. I mean, we did it before we came on. I was like, "Is there anything we shouldn't talk about?" You got to put up guardrails.
No, you do, absolutely. I mean, and Eric talked to it. As I find I've not spoken to many Norwegian people in my life, but I've spoken to a few. They are so incredibly humble. I mean, this week, just to reference a non-football podcast, The Rest is Politics US, I had an interview with the Norwegian Prime Minister. And that, even for a show with that sort of gravitas, to get a head of state, a prime minister on, but it seems so in keeping with just the Norwegian psyche that they are such humble people, and that with Eric, it allowed me just to have not quite banter with him, but I just felt sort of very comfortable talking to him, because Eric talks about it's probably most famous for, well, the early part of his career is defined by the error that he made on his debut. Most shocking error that a goalkeeper can make. Now, I'm only comfortable calling it as it is now because I know I've spoken to him, and I know that he is so comfortable describing it in that way as well.
And of course, he had games afterwards for us.
He went on to become a cult hero. But it's one of the most infamous debuts. I can't think of any other Spurs player who's had a more infamous debut than that. The only other non-Spurs player I can think of was when Jonathan Woodgate, who of course went on to become a Spurs player. I was thinking of Woodgate.
That's exactly who I was thinking of for Madrid.
Real Madrid was sent off and injured or
something. Own goal.
Yeah. It was a combination of being sent off, scoring an own goal, or coming off injured. I can't remember which of the two it was. But I can't think of another Spurs player. Oh, maybe Paul Stewart missed a penalty on his Spurs debut. But But Eric's one, because it was live on television at a point when not many games were live on TV, which again is why I like talking and just comparing, what happens now and what happened in the past. That was such a big thing for for Eric, but the fact that he's taken ownership of that.
I think you have to. Stuff like that, especially if you're in the public eye.
Yeah.
Of course, we heard so much from Eric last year with the games against Glimt in the Europa League and then the Champions League. So I think your interview of him approached things differently. He obviously spoke on other pods about his time in the 90s, but he was also very much focused on giving people an insight into Glimt and their position in Norwegian society and stuff like that. So, but yeah, he's a fantastic speaker, and it's so nice how close he feels to Spurs fans many years later.
Yeah, definitely.
Anything you couldn't cover? Anything you wish you could have put into that sort of first third of the 90s period that you covered?
So I think I've covered all the main topics, all the main controversies, and probably the season reviews are a pretty all encompassing, I guess, in terms of capturing the key events and players of those times. I suppose you always like to think, could I have got another couple of players on there? But then equally, it's always a bit of a gamble until you've spoke. I've been lucky that each player that I've had on, I've often not had a great deal of running time with them beforehand. And you're always a bit nervous, like, are they going? And so far, all of them have been fantastic. But are they going to turn up and say, "Oh, I don't remember that game," or "I can't tell you any more about that. I don't remember it," or just give a very vanilla response, or just regurgitate something that someone else had already said before that. Yeah, I'm sure that will happen to me at some point. That I will get to that situation. But no, all the guests have been really good so far. So I'm happy with with what's been covered.
I mean, you could always throw out a few names of Hail Marys, right? Like Gary Mabbott would be terrific. Maybe more the 80s. I guess into the 90s. He was captain.
He sort of straddles the 80s and 90s. Yeah. I have spoken to Gary Mabbott, but he does. In fact, I went to a Legends night, which he was the guest at, and you just give him the mic. Well, the presenter, the host, gave him the microphone, and then bang, he talks for an hour. Very, very engaging. Very, very interesting, incredibly insightful, very, very honest, as you'd imagine. 15-minute break, comes on, does another hour, covers the rest of his career, and then takes some questions. But I'd asked him about contributing to the book, and he said he doesn't really do that. And I understood why. When he gave his talk, he explained or reminded us of his role with the club as an ambassador, that every morning he has a list of up to about 20 people, older Spurs members, who he calls and wishes happy birthday to, or will speak to if he knows that they're isolated. This obviously started during COVID. I just think the amount of conversations he must have about Spurs, that must be really, really repetitive. And knowing him to be such a great bloke that he does, I'm sure call number 20 he's sounding just as fresh and enthusiastic as he is at call 1. So I totally understand why he then wouldn't want to then come on and do a podcast and discuss the same stories. It's more important that he's fresh for those calls that he does with those Spurs fans through the club.
And we as fans should respect the privacy and guardrails that these people that we idolize put around their lives. Like coming back to Darren Anderton, don't walk up to him in a restaurant and give him grief about something that happened.
No, that's it. I made a very, very speculative approach to Gazza's agent, partly because his book came out not that long ago, and through my publishers, through the agent that I work with there, I said, "Look, do you know anyone in those circles?" And he said, "I'll try." And he got me an email for Gazza's manager, because he'd been on Talk Sport, and he had spoken about effectively why he shouldn't have gone to Spurs ahead of Man United in '88. And I thought it'd be great if I could get him on here and we can get his side of it from a purely Spurs perspective. But I never got a response from his manager. I can try again.
You've had that from a secondhand source in Guy Butters talking about it.
Yeah,
if I remember correctly. He he referenced the fact that maybe, well, not the fact, the opinion that perhaps if Gaza had gone to United and been under Ferguson's wing, maybe his life would have turned out differently. But Guy felt maybe that wouldn't be the case. It's something just in him that, and it didn't make a difference for George Best. I think was the reference that Guy made in terms of.
I think Gaz I think Gaz has said the same thing, didn't he?
Yeah.
I'm quite happy and I'm quite content. I mean, that just felt like an opportunity I had to take, and it hasn't come to anywhere. But I'm quite happy in my mind for when I think of Paul Gascoigne, for me to think about scoring that free kick against Arsenal and the footballer that I idolised and wanted to be in the playground as a 9 and as a 10-year-old. I'm quite happy to kind of leave my memories of Gascoigne as the player, particularly as that Spurs player.
Yes, I mean that's I've heard that from other people too. So the podcast evolved over the course of season 1. We had spoken before, and I had a rough idea of what you had in mind, but you started introducing bonus episodes of match previews, as you discussed already, these 10-minute snippets of history of Spurs in the 90s against the team that we were playing that weekend. So how did we fare against Man City, for example, in the 90s, those games? And those are some real memory lane moments. I enjoyed those. You had bonus episodes based around holidays as well, like New Year's Day, Boxing Day. Those were not something I, again, wouldn't have thought to do. I thought that was great. And you've started including discussions with supporters of other clubs. So you've chatted with Andrew Nagy. Nagy, there we go. Who's an author of a book about Newcastle. Newcastle history, or just Newcastle? I forget.
It's about his love affair with Newcastle, which there we go. By default really covers the 90s, because he's the same age as I am.
But you looked back at 5 games in the 90s and some shared players, and that was a fun listen too. So I hope to hear more of those moving forward into season 2. And I can speak to this. You start producing a podcast and you get these ideas, and where you started isn't necessarily exactly where you end up. And excitement can overtake you, and you want to put these extra things out and keep it live. I thought it was nice to see how you evolved and kept adding to the pod, and especially into season 2 now. So did you put a lot? Was there a plan to maybe have these bonus episodes when you started? Did they evolve? Did it come out more over time?
Yeah, they just evolved really. I guess I'm inspired by a couple of people. So Stu from CADS now does his shelf news daily podcast. So I thought, it'd just be good to get those bonus episodes, particularly whilst I'm between season 1 and season 2 at the moment.
Yeah,
just to keep the podcast feed live, really. But those bonus ones are very easy to record. I don't have a guest for them. It is just me talking. I mean, it's just a bloke listing results from 30 years ago. That's but hopefully they just keep everything ticking over. I'm certainly not looking to contribute or add to the 100 and however many previews there'll be of Spurs Man City in 2026. So it's just a reminder. It's just the sort of conversation that I have with my friends before a game as we're thinking about a match. You think about, remember that game when that happened. So that's really what it's designed to do. We're currently in a run of fixtures where this feels really relevant, because we're playing teams that we played regularly in the 90s. Obviously, I didn't do one for Burnley because there weren't any games against Burnley in the 90s, but Man City, where there were 7. Next week there'll be one for away games at Manchester United, and I try and segment them. So if it's Man United away next week, I'll only talk about games at Old Trafford during the 90s. Then that means that I can then do the flip for White Hart Lane. They are still fairly timeless, so I don't give any predictions or previews about what's happening in the game, other than that this might just spark something. It might trigger a memory in you that you can go and, whether you're on your way to the game, whether you're in supporters club bar, somewhere on the other side of the world, these are the conversations you can have. So, do you remember when Gaza scored that goal against Man City on the opening day of the 1991 season? That's what it hopes to spark. I'm hoping I'm going to get I'm going to ramp it up a little bit for the Arsenal game, is the plan for next month. I'm in touch with a very high profile and prominent Spurs podcaster who I think would be great at discussing the sort of vibes of what it was like in anticipation of a home North London derby, which hopefully will come off. Yeah.
Looking forward to that. And season 2, anything you want to share about season 2? Will it follow the same sort of format of player interviews, season reviews? big
Sure.
topics.
Yeah, it will do. It'll be a mix of all three of those things, really. It'll be a mix of season reviews, of which I've recorded. I've recorded the first three of them. So I've recorded 93, 94 with Gascoigne from Dr.
Oh, cool.
Tottenham,
Yeah.
94, 95, which I had to do as two parts because there was just so much to it.
Yeah.
I've recorded that with Chris Slegg, who helped me with my first book, but he wrote the book specifically about the 94, 95 season. And then Marcus Buckland from the Tottenham Way. I've recorded the 95-6 season review with him. I've got our mutual friend David Harris from Grumpy Old Spurs.
Yep.
We're scheduled to do 96-97. Then I've interviewed Jason Dazelle, which again, human story. He's not revered in the same way that Darren Anderson or Eric talks that are Spurs players, but his story is absolutely fascinating. He had a book through Pitch Publishing, which I read, and that sort of sparked me to get in contact with him. Hopefully I've got an interview with Jerry Francis coming up that will go out within season 2. He obviously plays a very, very significant part as the manager of the team during that mid part of the 90s.
And some highs and lows as well. He has an interesting story because I often forget about the FA Cup semi that he got us to.
Yeah.
I was reminded of by reading your book. But you only think of the end often with managers, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. So, yeah.
Lovely guy.
Jerry I interviewed for the book, and his memories, this is what amazes me with someone like him or Steve Perriman, who contributed to Hot Shot Tottenham, just how vividly they remember things. So I think Jerry's in his mid-70s. Steve Perriman will be in that sort of ballpark as well. But just how crystal clear their memory is of specific conversations they had with people or what happened in matches is it's kind of really awe-inspiring, actually. I just hope that my memory is as strong as that is in 30 years' time.
Mine isn't now, so. So I guess the League Cup final will be season 3 then.
Yeah. So the idea is, the season 2 will take us from the point when Terry Venables is sacked in that summer of 93 into the mid part of the 90s. And my plan is the conclusion to season 2 will probably be the appointment of Christian Gross as manager.
Yeah, cool.
And therefore season 3, which at the moment, my plan is the final episode will be Sol Campbell's departure in 2001, which is the season I don't cover within the book. So Glenn Hoddle's there by then. Alan Sugar's sold up to ENIC, and within months they've had to deal with Sol Campbell going. So that feels like it would be an obvious point to end that season 3, and then I'll work out where it goes from there, whether I then go all the way back into the 80s, whether I continue the story forward from 2001 onwards, or maybe I leave it there. Yeah,
I mean, it's depending on how you feel and what you think you can contribute, and whether you've got the time. And I will say, he probably can't, and he probably wouldn't, but I would definitely listen to an interview between you and Sol Campbell. I know a lot of Spurs fans wouldn't. But
that thought has.
He's such an important figure.
He is, He is certainly during the 90s as a player, and that was kind of quite refreshing when I wrote the book. Really, is that although I know, and I'm guessing most of my readers will know what happens when you cut that story off in summer of 2000. He is our captain. Gianola's just left, so he's our undoubtedly our best player and most important player at the club. He was our captain who lifted the League Cup. He was one of our own. He's come through our academy. He's now an England regular. He's quite often being discussed as being one of the best defenders in world football, but he's only got 12 months on his contract, and this whole new concept of Bosman rulings and players leaving on a free isn't something that people really understand yet. And certainly
such a big
club
deal,
owners,
club
owners don't really know how to handle this. We're in a way that they probably do now. Now you get to a point where once they're within 2 or 3 years of it, you either sell them or you don't. But no one had that playbook at that point. And of course, with the club changing ownership as well, if you cut off the book in 2000, of course there's a parallel universe where even if he doesn't stay, if he goes and signs for Barcelona or Inter Milan, which is what I think we were all expecting was probably the most likely outcome, his history, for better or for worse as a player, is very different, and our relationship with him is of course very, very different as well. So he would be an amazing guest apart from the fact that he comes across as being quite a weird bloke, and he's obviously lacks self-awareness. I think that's probably quite clear, but he would be a fascinating person just to talk about what his experiences were like during the 90s.
And of course, I remember covering his overlap interview with Gary Neville and Roy Keane and whatnot, and he has some justified sort of annoyances towards Spurs. Let's put it politely.
Yeah,
but I do think that his story has changed a bit over time, and so I think he would be quite defensive, even if you could wave a magic wand, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's a season 3 issue. A season 3 Gareth's problem.
That is, yeah.
You get Neil Ruddock on, or his wife, I guess. So
yes.
Okay, so just a few small questions, or which could be big depending on how you want to approach them, just to wrap us up as we come to time. What do you make of the accusation that the current Spurs team is the worst since the 1990s?
Or even included in the 1990s. Yeah, I mean, this was one of my inspirations for writing the book, 3-4 years ago now. It was just these constant references you'd get to the 90s when things go wrong. This is as bad as we've had since the 90s. I
mean, I asked my dad, and he was like, well, it would be the relegation team in the 70s, but...
Yeah, well, of course, yeah, the generation above me who remember Spurs getting relegated in 76, 77 have faced worse than we have. Yeah, it's amazing how things change when you've got nostalgia covered rose tinted glasses, and you can look back on something with a bit of distance. Hopefully one of the points that I get across about the 90s is it was genuinely, without using an overly trite phrase, it was a roller coaster. You really didn't know what you were going to get from one season to another. And as hard as it is to try and reflect on what's happening over the last 10 years from where we are now, you can kind of see there's a general trend of decline, certainly in the last 6 or 7 years, which I don't think was the case in the 90s, because you have a really bad season like 93, 94 when we win at Oldham to stay up in the penultimate game of the season, and then we get deducted 12 points, banned from the FA Cup, and to all intent and purposes, 94-95 is going to be the relegation season. There's no way it can be anything different. Then Sugar signs Jurgen Klinsmann. We have this incredible season where we get to an FA Cup semi-final and then completely Spursy it up in an incredibly spectacular way in a semi-final. And then Klinsmann leaves, and then you're at the other end of the roller coaster. Using the roller coaster analogy, I never know whether things are good when you're at the top of the roller coaster or at the bottom.
I have no idea. Jack
Pickbrook
references it all the time with View from the Lane, and I'm the same thing. I'm like, is it on the way down? Is that good?
Yeah.
Or is it just meant to be a representative of ebbs and flows? I don't know.
Exactly.
It depends on how much you like roller coasters.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, and then you have these points like the 91 FA Cup final win when the club is saved from financial ruin. We're in Europe, and then you've got the League Cup win in 99, and conventional wisdom tells you win a trophy, and then that sparks an upwards trend. That's going to be your catalyst. But as we're obviously finding in current day in 2025, that's actually not the case. In fact, quite the contrary. Almost the last thing you want to do is win a trophy if you want continuous progress as a league team. So the 90s had all those ups and downs. What I would say about the 90s, looking back on it though, was that we always had that magic player. There's almost there's always that overlap. You go from Gascoigne and Lineker. I suppose it took a while for Teddy to become a really special player.
Yeah, maybe.
But you had Teddy, and then you got Klinsmann there. Anderson. You've still got Sheringham and Anderson at that point. Then Ginola arrives at a point when it was really, really bleak as a Spurs fan. But at least you had Ginola, you had Anderson, you had obviously Klinsmann came back again. Whereas right now at this point on the 31st of January, it's not quite clear who that next cult hero is going to be, or not even the cult hero, who that next truly world-class special Spurs player is. But history tells us that they always do come along. There is always someone who then becomes that generational talent, which, again, it's not obvious now. It wasn't obvious probably 11 years ago before Poch came in that obviously Harry Kane and then Sonny were going to become those those totemic figures. But chances are, if we were to reflect on this conversation in 2 years' time, you look back at it and you say, "Oh yeah, this was, we didn't realise it now, but Xavi Simons now is that player who we put on that pedestal." Or
the currently infamous green shoots.
Yes, yeah.
And one final question is just having started your own pod and having been on pods.
Mm-hmm.
Any advice for somebody who's looking to start the 150th Spurs podcast in 2026?
I think it's with anyone who's producing something, it's just try and do something that's going to be different from what's already out there. Make sure that you can stand out, and if not, make sure you do it better than your competitors. It's a very, very crowded marketplace within Spurs podcasts in particular. But yeah, don't do what is natural to you.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was talking about a period 30 years ago. That's what's natural. That's where I think I can add value to the listener. If I'd done a spin-off of Game is About Glory, which I've got as a platform to talk about contemporary issues, but if I was going to spin off my own podcast and just be the 148th Spurs podcast talking about a game 2 days ago or previewing one 2 days into the future, for me, that's not something I could do. But perhaps if you've got a particular nuance or a slightly different angle, then consider that.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be a bit of an echo chamber, but I feel the same way. When I have done contemporary commentary, which doesn't either include covering other people's opinions.
Well, again, but that's your niche, though, isn't it?
So. Yeah, exactly. I'm far less comfortable with it, and I don't think I'm as good at it. So yeah, stick to what you think you're good at and what you're enjoying. I guess this is a second part to that question. I said I'd only have one more, but I don't think I asked you this last time, which is, why do you think there are so many Spurs podcasts? What is it about this club? What is it about this club over time?
Yeah, because I think you've covered, there are teams with bigger fan bases than us that don't have as many podcasts.
Yeah,
I do remember when I was talking to, I can't remember if it was my publisher or someone about my publisher, when I first had the idea of the book, I was told that Spurs books always sell well. There's something about Spurs as a club that the way that its fan base acts, it wants to be all consuming, which maybe lends itself well to the world of podcasts and and YouTube channel.
I think we're rabid.
Yeah.
And we do.
Well, I suppose to go back to one of the earlier questions you asked me about having routine 2-0 wins, for me would be something wouldn't encourage me to go and listen to podcasts. Well, maybe if you are a team that are, and we have to remind ourselves that actually there's not many. We think we're really unique and doing Spursy stuff, but actually every team is Spursy. It's just some are slightly less Spursy than we are. But
true, ask a Man United fan,
Yeah. No, absolutely. But yeah, if you are Liverpool last year, what was there to say once you've won another game comfortably 3-0? What is there to talk about?
It all depends, right? It all depends if there was a magic moment or a controversial red card or something. And we can always plumb the depths. Well, thank you, Gareth. This was, as always, a very fun conversation. Why don't we do a quick plug for where people can find you online, well, books, and where people can get them, and same with your podcast, where people can listen.
Thank you very much. Yes, so both the podcast and the book about the 90s are both called the same thing. So they're both called Is Gascoigne Going To Have a Crack? The podcast is available in all the obvious places, through Apple, through Spotify. I know I check loads of boxes when I set it up on Acast, so I know I can get it on my Alexa as well.
Yes.
So you can get it on my places. I'm not on YouTube. And then the books, you can find them both on Amazon. So Hotshot Tottenham and Is Gascoigne Going To Have a Crack? You'll find me on Bluesky. I've now got to remember what my Bluesky handle is. At 80s 90s Spurs Books.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah.
And I think that's everything. So thank you, Gareth, and thank you for listening. I hope that you go out and give Gareth all of the clicks and likes and reviews and comments on his pods. It does help for visibility, my understanding. So go out and support somebody who's doing something different out there in the Spurs podosphere. It's we need more people like Gareth. And with that, just keep listening to Spurs podcasts and keep making Spurs podcasts. And I'll drop links to Gareth's everything in the comments if you want to try to find it. Thank you.